Little quick warning on that one, you know.
Because we're going to have a quiz on Monday.
Indeed. A quiz on Monday. Yeah. All right. So, yesterday we were talking about France, right? Okay, and so France just lost which war in 1871? Who owned them in the war? Well, yeah, the Prussians. But who, in particular, was living up to his previous namesake, carrying on the fantastic name in Prussian history that was going to be ultra-militaristic and conquer the French? No? Oh, Helmut von Moltke. Helmut von Moltke! Indeed! So that guy's doing some good work, actually surrounding the French army at Sedan, annihilating them, taking the emperor hostage. Worked well. Not going to work so well for his great nephew, right? Helmut von Moltke Jr. in World War I. All right, but this is oh, yes, it should be taming the responsive nationalists. Still on now. Yeah. All right, and so France didn't do so well. Remember, what was the consequence of that? Once they formed the National Assembly as a provisional government with Adolphe Thiers as the provisional president of that Third Republic, how were things going between March and May of that of 1871? What do you think? Talked about it yesterday. Ended with a little, some pictures and things. Stuff about that. Give me an indication of how it didn't go well. Late to practice, late to Euro. He had to run lines in practice, and he's going to have to do 20 push-ups in Euro after we're done with this stuff. Okay. All right. So, what was that? All right, they got bombarded like crazy by the Prussians. Then the Prussians just kind of sat there while Paris tried to figure stuff out. And then what did the Parisians do to each other? Killed each other. Because we had the Jacobins and the Communards versus the monarchists. Very similar situation to what we so frequently have in French history. I don't know why they can't. They just can't get the revolutions right. I mean, we did it right the first time, and then, we had 80 years of problems with, one particular big issue, and then had to solve that with a civil war. And then, it kind of went better after that for a while. All right, so France, though, they just have to keep redoing things. All right, but point being, after the Franco-Prussian War, things are rough for France. By the 1890s, they're going to be having even more issues dealing with not only nationalism, but also race. And so that brings us to the issue of the Dreyfus Affair. A little anti-Semitism and the ideas of racialism mixed in there with a guy by the name of Alfred Dreyfus, Captain Alfred Dreyfus. What do you guys know about him?
He was a French captain.
Good. Very good. And what was his problem, quote unquote? He was Jewish. Okay, and so during the Franco-Prussian War, what did they think he did? Brilliant! All right, gave away secrets about the French positions in the war to the dirty Germans. Here you go.
This is a moment in Jewish history. Captain Alfred Dreyfus of the French army was wrongly accused of spying for Germany in 1864 and sentenced to life imprisonment. Because he was a Jew, an unexpected mass of French citizens directed their prejudices towards the Jewish people as a whole. The famous French writer Émile Zola came to Dreyfus' defense in his article J'accuse. Dreyfus was eventually pardoned, but not before the scandal awakened the feelings of countless Jewish activists. One was Theodor Herzl, a young journalist covering the trial at the time. Herzl was so moved by the bigotry he saw that he became a leader in the Zionist movement and started the first International Zionist Congress to discuss the return to the land of Israel. This Jewish history moment is brought to you by Israel National Radio.
All right, very nice. So the Dreyfus Affair is going to be one of those elements of anti-Semitism that are happening more and more frequently in the late 19th century. Thankfully, Dreyfus will get off the hook. It'll take nearly 10 years for them to do it. But why did it finally happen? Why were they finally releasing him from prison and restoring him back to French society? Public outcry, exactly. So most people were opposed because he was Jewish. But then the response to that was a bunch of French authors and especially Jewish authors that are going to come to his aid. And so what were some of those authors' names? Who do we have?
Herzl.
All right, Theodor Herzl. And so Theodor Herzl is going to be important, something you might need to know for the AP exam, for instance, because Theodor Herzl, what's he going to end up doing after this response? Bring together the Zionist movement, the first true effort for Zionism. And what was Zionism?
Go back to
Back to Israel. Do we have an Israel yet? No, we will not until?
World War II.
Yes, World War II. Okay, very good. And so after World War II, all right. So after World War II, we're going to get an actual Israel because of people like the Zionists, like Theodor Herzl, and who was another author, French author, who I don't believe was Jewish, who was trying to help out Alfred Dreyfus as well. Emile Zola. Emile Zola. He was not only a journalist but also wrote novels at this time. Very, very popular man. And so when this popular novelist and journalist started writing articles in defense of Dreyfus, that's going to get the kind of positive attention that we'll need. What was that? Okay. Yeah. There you go. I need this back. I love that. Okay, there you go. All right, so the Dreyfus Affair in France in 1894 is going to be a big deal because it represents for us a lot of the changing mentality that's happening throughout Europe. It's becoming far more and more pervasive. Now, the idea, of course, is anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism, how long has it been around? Forever. Since they killed Jesus, exactly. So since the Jews crucified Jesus, Jesus being a Jew as well, obviously, there has been a lot of hatred towards Jews. But by the 19th century, it's more than just a hatred toward the Jews. Now it's this answer to all of the world's problems. And so we can see some of that portrayed here with the Dreyfus Affair itself, where we've got them blaming what, essentially, on this Jewish captain? Defeat. And so it's not just that he's a Jew and that they hate him. It's also the fact that because he is a Jew, it makes sense that he was the one that is responsible for us losing in the war. So we've got the problem, which is we lost the war, and the solution, which was, it must have been the Jews. Yeah, it had to have been the Jews that did it to us. All right, and so that's the new idea that's going to be, or the new, I guess you could say, aspect of anti-Semitism that's going to be added to it in the late 19th century and then progress into the 20th century, is that Jews are in this world conspiracy. And because they're in this world conspiracy to bring about the downfall of Christianity and bring about the downfall of Western civilization, that answers all of our problems to modernity, right? And what is modernity, by the way? All right, modern stuff. Okay, so modern problems are obviously the result of Jews. Now, again, this has been a long time in its development. You can see from this picture. What's this picture telling you? If you were to see this on an AP exam, which you probably wouldn't, because frequently they do not deal with anti-Semitic issues on the AP exam, and the idea is as to why.
Because they're Jewish taking the test.
Okay, because there may be some Jews taking the test.
There's be someone who just blasts 2 points.
Exactly. There's too much room for problems on the AP exam, and they don't want to deal with that. Justifiably, I would say, but it's still important for us to think about. So here if you were to ever get this on an AP exam, what do you think? What are they going to be? What would this tell you? All right. So we see. I don't know. Are there 12? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'd say 15. Or 16, actually. There's another little guy here. Yeah. All right, but that's okay. But yeah, so the point is, these guys are obviously Jewish because of the markings and the facial expressions and things like that. That's something that Europeans at this time would recognize. But what time period is it? That's the important thing. Medieval. It's 1493, so late Middle Ages or Renaissance, depending on. But because this is happening in Germany, we're going to say late Middle Ages. Everything was a little behind, right? So, this German region, what do they believe is the solution to having some problems with Jews? Burn them! All right, and so, yikes. So, because of that, Christians are going to start to ghettoize Jews in the Middle Ages, and throughout the rest of European history, they're going to use this pretty frequently, because they figure, well, let's remove the Jews, put them in their own little section of town. Sometimes it was, something that Jews wanted to do, so that they could avoid hostilities, but often it was kind of a thing that you had to do. And they started having to wear the Star of David in some cities around Europe as well. So it's not like the Nazis were the first to do this. Remember, the Nazis stole their ideas from other people throughout history. All right, another thing that happened in the late 19th century is that Jews often became the targets of what we call Volkish thinkers. What is a Volkish thinker?
White skin, dark hair.
Okay, so white skin, dark hair, a culturally German type of person. And what were you going to say, Tara?
Volk is people.
Yes, Volk are the people. And so during the Romantic era and after, when we get into things like Nazism in the 20th century, this idea of looking back at our cultural roots, and we want to have pure cultural roots. So the Volk, they may not be Aryan, right, which is the ultimate impurity, but the Volk, they are a pure cultural people. And so they want their blood tainted, quote unquote. They want it tainted? By Judaism or
Hitler is like the police who had the vote to step below.
as the what?
Like the step below Aryan.
Just a little step below
And
there.
it was like normal people like in other countries that were
Exactly. All right. And then we have Karl Lueger. So we're going to hear more about Karl Lueger when we get into discussing Hitler and reading some books on Hitler coming up in the next couple topics here. But Karl Lueger, he was the Burgermeister of Vienna. And the Burgermeister was the mayor, essentially, of Vienna. And so as the Burgermeister of Vienna, he used anti-Semitism as a political vehicle. So basically, in order to get people to vote for him, he said that Jews, they have this terrible religion that we should all hate, and therefore you should elect me so that I can start putting limits upon them in society and making sure that they cannot have free participation of their religion. All right, you notice what he's stressing though. Jewish religion. All right, Hitler's going to steal these ideas, and then he's going to say not Jewish religion, but what? Jewish people or Jewish race, meaning it's unchangeable. Whereas Karl Lueger said, I decide who is a Jew and who isn't. All right, and so essentially he would just say, you're Jewish, and they'd be like, well, no, I'm not, and they'd say, yes, you are, because I'm the Burgermeister, and I think you're Jewish, and I don't like you, so therefore, you're Jewish. All right, so they're going to use those ideas later. Yes?
I remember seeing that if you're referring like specifically to a person, the religion, like they would be a Hebrew, but the race they would be a Jew. Is that how it is?
You know, the way I've always understood it is, I mean, first of all, the whole idea of religion equating to race is in many ways totally flawed.
Well, I know, but is
But-
it supposedly a Jewish race, like with this thing?
I would say yes,
Yeah.
because I mean, if you
It's
get
systematic.
yes, if you get a group of people that copulate throughout the generations and keep producing generation after generation with similar traits, that's a race essentially, right? They're still a human race, but they have just different characteristics than say someone from Persia or Africa or the United States would, for instance. So it's just
Oh, I was saying that I'm pretty sure that the proper term for that, like the Jewish like race, it's not like it's not like religion race, but it's like like you're saying, traits. Like,
Yes.
The Semites or Semites.
absolutely. So I mean, I could convert to Judaism if I wanted to, certainly, right?
But you would
Wouldn't
know
be
that.
Semitic.
But I would not be Semitic. But if I married someone who was obviously very Semitic, and we started to produce generations, then pretty soon, if they kept doing that, that would turn into, see what I'm saying? Okay, so that's the way I've always understood it. However, the way they're using it at this time is like a science. And so the science that's developing here is going to be based in this fatuous assumption, this demagogic assumption that Jews just want to take over the world. So a good example of that is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. There's a footnote in the book about it in one of your reading sections about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, where it says that first of all, anyone remember what the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was, according to the people that were publishing this stuff? What did they proclaim it was? No? Okay. So, Protocols of the Elders of Zion was supposedly a pamphlet that was published by a bunch of Russian Jews, and it was being sent all over Europe to other Jews to convince them that they need to start getting into the banking systems, into the hospitals, into you name it, any kind of career they can in order to slowly start to pervert society and then overtake it. So the goal of Judaism is to overtake the world by seeping into society and then overthrowing it through nefarious acts, right? So, do you think Jews really published that kind of thing? No. So it was a piece of propaganda that a bunch of anti-Semites published from a Jewish perspective and lied about it, saying that it was obviously Jews that did it, and then sent it all over the place, hoping other people would read it and say, oh no, the Jews are trying to do this, when really it's just this falsification of everything. And so it's not true at all, and yet people accepted it as fact, including guys like Hitler, of course. And so Hitler in the 20th century, he came into a Germany that was in no way anti-Semitic and in no way felt any kinds of ideas about Jews, and it was all Hitler that inspired this anti-Semitic idea, right? So it was just Hitler that inspired anti-Semitism in Germany. No, that's absolutely false. The point here again, before we even get to Hitler, is that anti-Semitism was popular all over Europe, especially in places like Russia, France, even the United States. So we had a lot of issues at this time with racism, and so you can see that on the board there too with that that picture. It says, Deutschland überwindet das Judentum. Anyone know what that means? All right, essentially, yeah. So it says Germany has overcome the Jews. All right, so Germany has overcome the Jews. So that's an idea that was in place before Hitler came to power, and Hitler's simply going to take that idea and continue the process, develop the mechanism to facilitate greater hatred and the actions of hatred towards Jews. And so he used things like rhetoric. So what is rhetoric, by the way? Speaking. So before they ever had it, or before they even got involved in the Holocaust, the Nazis were simply playing on the same kind of rhetoric that was already there before they ever got elected into power, right? And so there was already this rhetoric that was pervasive in the 19th century in Germany, known as the Judenfrage. So I think we talked about this a little bit last year, but now we'll get into a little more detail about it. Ever since the 1880s, especially in Germany, there was this idea of a Judenfrage, or Jewish question. And so the Jewish question, what that ultimately means is that there must be a Jewish what? Problem. And there needs to be, according to the Germans before Hitler, and then with Hitler, there needs to be a what to that problem? A solution. And so Hitler and the Nazis will simply be the ones to facilitate that idea to become a final solution. This is how we finally rid ourselves of this problem, right? So, what's the effect on society? If you're walking around, let's say, there's no politicians yet, other than guys like Karl Lueger who are saying we should, get rid of the Jews, but you ultimately, anytime someone says there's a Judenfrage, you ultimately start thinking, oh yeah, I agree, there is. I mean, there's just something in your brain that says, yes, there's obviously a problem with the Jews in our country. We need to be überwindet das Judentum. We need to overcome the Jews too. All right, so if that's just ingrained in you, what's it going to take to turn that into an action? Just a leader. Okay, it's not going to take much. I mean, if the government is facilitating that and saying, hey, by all means, do what you want for the Jews, that's all it's going to take. Okay? So, the effects on society we'll get more into a little bit later, but another strange thing happening in Europe at this time is not only a Judenfrage, but we also saw a new thing called the Frauenfrage. Okay? So the Frauenfrage, what that means is a prom question, and a leader at this time, this guy, was asking this lady to prom. And so, Taryn, you are on the world stage here. YouTube is watching. What do you say? Yay! All right. Yeah. Okay. Gunnar didn't catch that one. Caleb put me up to wielding in, or somewhere sneaking in a prom question.
Yeah.
Wasn't that right? Frauenfrage, how perfect is that? Prom question.
I was like, why is there a picture of
Yeah. And then I was like, maybe I could add it to the imperialism section. It's all about, that's not a good place to put it. Global domination relating to prom, I don't think so. Okay, so, yeah, let's get... No, but I wouldn't have anywhere else. Just, come on, prom question. Yeah, all right, I look bad. Okay, so it's Caleb's fault. Okay, so Western imperialism now is what we're going to talk about. And as you can see from the political cartoon here, this is definitely something you can see on the AP exam. What's this telling you about Western?
That's like the most popular political party.
It is. It's hugely popular. And because, obviously, it's, I would say, true. I would say it's absolutely true. You've got this British fat cat who is obviously an industrialist, and how do you know that? He's got the cool stovepipe hat, and the sideburns are glorious, aren't they? Yeah, all right, sideburns unite. Okay, and so this guy is obviously enthusiastic about getting his dirty little mittens all over every other little part of the globe. Why? Because he's a fat cat capitalist, right? And so that brings us to an interesting debate in European history. As we're walking through this stuff, there's a few things I want you to think about. Number one, because this could relate to an essay topic. Number one, what were the differences between old imperialism and new imperialism? Okay? Old versus new. And so the old imperialism would be like mercantilist time period, developing American colonies, Spanish colonies in the New World. That's the old school stuff, like Columbus and onward. Versus new imperialism, which is all about industry, altruism, social Darwinism, etc. Yes?
Oh, it's like selling, subjugating people and forcing the products to quality.
There you go. So what are the big differences? Another big question that comes up We'll get to it in a minute, don't worry. That's just to get the pump primed a little bit. So, another big question I want you to be thinking about while we're going through this is Western civilization just inherently superior to the rest of the world? Because that's an idea that a lot of, especially, imagine this, white folk believe. All right, so a bunch of white Europeans believe that they are just inherently better at everything, and that's why imperialism worked, and that's why they were able to conquer the globe and subjugate so many millions of people, because they're just better. Okay, so that's definitely arguable, and so that might be something that you end up arguing next week during our debate. Another thing to keep in mind is imperialism because of capitalism? So should we blame capitalism for the things that we see happening in imperialism? Okay, 3 things I want you to be thinking about as we're starting into this stuff. All right, so we'll debate it as we go along, though. Let's take a look at old imperialism, review a little bit before May the 15th. We get a little Latin to start this thing off where it says mundus novus. What does that mean? Mundus novus.
New world.
New world. Novus meaning new and mundus meaning world. Okay, so new world. So with the old imperialism, it's 1492 and after, isn't it? Essentially, right? And so, what are we getting here? What kind of stuff are we doing?
Conquering America.
All right, conquering America and all the Americas, Central, South, North, you name it. All right, and then what else are we conquering and establishing trading posts? All right, other native lands, like for instance the Philippines, the East Indias, and then we're going to get little tiny snippets of Africa along the coasts. These are the old imperialism ways. So, the economic system that we have is very important to this thing because we have mercantilism. And what does mercantilism emphasize? High exports, low imports. Now, let's say you're Britain and you don't have a whole lot of stuff that grows naturally that helps you produce other products. Where are you going to get this stuff? Like trees or tar or you name what?
Your
Colonies. All right, so you have to establish colonies because you want to be able to produce goods cheaply. You cannot produce goods cheaply if you live in England where you don't have nearly enough enough natural resources to create these supplies. So, another thing that you want to do is create that favorable balance of trade, meaning that you get stuff cheaply from your colonies, then you produce it into a product, then you sell it at a nice high profit somewhere else in the world, right? And then you compete with your competitors. Wait, hold on. You defeat your competitors. How? How do you defeat your competitors? By out-competiting them. Yes, okay. So what you could do is not only beat them with the money, but what were France and England doing constantly in Canada and North America for about 100 years before the American Revolution? Fighting wars for territories in, woodland areas, essentially. It's like, oh, hey, we want the Ohio River Valley. No, we want the Ohio River Valley. Tough cookies, we're going to kill you, pop you in the face. And so they did! And then, G-Dubs comes along and, all hell breaks loose for the dirty Brits. Okay. Joke. I'll tell you later. Remind me later. Why won't you tell me?
Say it now.
You have to record it.
It's
I can't record it. Well, my 3
No,
subscribers might get upset. You never know. They might report it to their parents as they're weeping bitterly. Maddie, you might. I know you
One
might.
of the subscribers.
I know.
Give a shit. I
Oh!
really
All right. That's pertinent. I'll just be quiet. Okay. So many of you have already heard this joke because you went and saw Lincoln, but I'm reminded of Lincoln here, and so I'm going to tell it to those of you that maybe didn't see the movie. Any of you not see the movie? Okay. All right. So this is good for you guys. All right. So Lincoln had this fun story where it was about the Green Mountain Boy leader. He had 13 kids. Ethan Allen. There we go. Thank you. So Ethan Allen, he was capturing Fort Ticonderoga from the Dirty Brits, right? And so he went into Fort Ticonderoga to work out a deal with the Brits, doing this very gentlemanly discussion about the treaty, who would get the fortress and all the supplies. And so as he was doing this, he was like, "Hey guys, mind if I use the bathroom?" And they're like, "Go ahead." And so he went into the bathroom, and he was relieving himself, and noticed that there was a portrait of George Washington sitting in their bathroom. He went, "Huh, all right." And so he walked out, and the Brits, they were feeling pretty cheeky and were smiling here. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I bet you saw the portrait." And so they're like, "Oh, so Ethan Allen, did you see the portrait that is sitting on the wall of our bathroom?" He said, "Yes, I did." I said, "Well, what did you think?" He said, "I thought it was great." Why? I mean, George Washington in our bathroom? I mean, it's hilarious. He said, no, I agree. Because nothing makes a British soldier shit faster than a picture of George Washington. Huh? Yeah! Oh, that's good. Abraham Lincoln. What a good guy. All right, to get back to I don't know how we got on that. I'm sorry. Something about the Ohio River Valley and war. I don't know. Anyway, so problems of
How
colonization.
many times have you told that joke?
Once. Well, did it go okay?
No,
I'll listen to it later and I'll see. Okay, so problems of colonization. First of all, it costs a lot of money. So you got to have a corporation to help fund this thing. Because can even a king or queen by themselves pay for all of this stuff? No, they can't. And so, I mean, look at Isabella and Ferdinand. Rather than paying for all of Columbus's ships, which would have been expensive, what did they do?
Provided one of them.
They paid for one, and then he had to buy the other two, right? And so then the same thing with the Virginia Company. When they went and talked to King James, and they're like, "Hey, I want to start colonies." Well, all right, I'll give you the land. No, I don't own it, by the way. I'll give you the land, and then you do your thing. And if you make money, yeah, I'll love it. And if you don't, well, okay. So the kings can't afford it. So you need corporations that are going to work. Now the problem is there's a lot of unsuccess. I mean, frequently more unsuccess than there will be success. Because on the route over there, you got a good month-long journey in this, dank pit of despair that is the ship. And are you going to live very easily with those conditions? No. And so just on the way there, about half of the people die. And, just dumping bodies every day all overboard. Not much of a Christian burial there. You're just like, okay, throw them over. Because they dead. All right, and then once you show up, what are the conditions like?
Horrible.
Bad. And so then what happens to those people that are there?
Half of that.
They die, yeah. So half of those who make it end up dying or returning. And so about a quarter of the people who leave from the king's country and go to the king's new colony actually stay there and live. And a lot of those people don't live for very long. So, what are you going to have to do to make this thing work? What do you think? Motives for colonization. What's it going to take to get you to keep trying this stuff, despite its unsuccess rate and its expense? Huh? Money. Which you can get from? Tobacco. Exactly. All right, so some motives for colonization. Not only money, though, but come on, Christian people. There's obviously a really good motive. You bring Christ, you put him on a cannonball, he goes, "Ew!" as you fire him. That was sacrilegious. Okay. So, you kill him for Christ. It makes total sense. It's not hypocritical. All right. He totally preached that in the gospel somewhere. Kill the heck out of those natives. They deserve it. All right. So, another thing is there's going to be limited opportunities in Europe at this time. For especially guys like the Hidalgos, right? Excuse me, not the Hidalgos. Kind of your average, everyday, lower nobleman. He doesn't really have much of a stake in society back in Spain, for instance, because if you are not the firstborn son, are you going to get the land? No. And so if you're a second-born son in Spain, you might either go get an education and hope you can do something for the government, or you become a priest. So those are your options, or you work for your brothers. You don't want to do it. So, what could you do that's maybe more fun than being a priest or working for the government? Go colonize! Rather than being a Hidalgo back in España, what could you do? Become a conquistador. Yes, another Hidalgo. Instead, be a conquistador. All right. And so then there's government sponsorship. Why would governments sponsor colonies and think, this could be a good way to benefit us? Why would they do that?
High risk, high reward.
All right, so high risk, high reward. So they'll invest a little at first, and then when they see some success, they'll invest a lot. Because remember, the Spanish government, they have a system known as the quinto, which means everything that comes back from the New World, what do they get? A fifth. Very good, a quinto of that. Okay, so could work out very well for everybody if they're working hard. Virginia and Massachusetts Bay Companies, they're going to do this starting in 1606. How did it go for them initially? Virginia Company, how did it go for them? Very bad. This is where we get those numbers, right? They kept dying like crazy because they weren't like growing corn. Who wants corn, right? Instead, we're going to go to a malaria-infested swamp. Then we're going to go, kill some heathens that are nearby, and then try planting tobacco and see if that works. But we're not going to actually grow food. We're just going to grow tobacco. Doesn't that make more sense? Yeah, so they're going to die like crazy. And then the Massachusetts Bay Company, how's it going to go for them in their first, say, 60 years?
Not good.
Not so good. They're going to have a lot of starvation, a lot of death. They're going to end up there in winter. They're going to be in bad situation with the natives at first. And then, they're going to have Salem witch trials and all that fun stuff. So, not going to be great in many ways. Yeah. What? Yeah, it'd be kind of fun, I guess, if you were, an accuser. All right, and then the Dutch East India Company, they will have far more success, as you know from watching Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Okay, valid historical source. Not really, not really. Okay, so there's also the Renaissance curiosity at this time. Why would this spur old imperialism? Renaissance curiosity.
Because you want to explore.
Yes, you do want to explore because we're learning more. Now remember, they knew the globe was not flat. Right? They knew the Earth was not flat and that Atlas was not holding it up because they had been reading some ancient sources during the Renaissance, such as
NATO.
Pythagoras! Because what did Pythagoras prove in the 3rd century BCE?
Like,
The sphericity of the globe. And so anyone who was a Renaissance humanist was reading that and being like, yeah, totally, I dig that. So educated Europeans knew that there was cool stuff out there and they should explore and find it. Then you had spices. Oh, man. I mean, imagine how terrible your state would be without pepper, right? So where are we going to get our pepper? India. And we could get, what else would we get? Curry, cinnamon, silks. Yes, and so my dank pit of despair back in Europe, my castle, which is just leaking and festering and disgusting vile vermin all the time, I could start to decorate it, couldn't I? I could get some nice tapestries, I could get some nice silks, which I get at a very high price from somewhere else in the world, and people had to die to buy them, right? But hey, I got a cool house now, and my food is flavorful, isn't it? Yes, all right, well worth it. All right, and then material gain, really that one should come first in our list here because that's really the biggest stimulus for all of these people is money and wealth. And then you've got exploitation. All right, why would that be a motive? Exploitation.
Because you won't prove that you're right.
Yeah, you want to prove that you're better. You're white, you're proud, you've got better stuff sometimes, as we'll find out when the conquistadors went to Spain. It wasn't really their weapons that helped them. Anyone know what it was?
Swords.
Okay, it was
Smallpox.
Okay, it was first their trickery. First their trickery. They convinced them to accept them and convinced them, hey, we'll make a treaty with you. There's no longer a need to keep having this war. And then kill the king, right? And so once they kill the king, then they start burning, raping, and pillaging, and then get them all sick. And so after that, they can exploit them through what kind of labor? Cheap. Slave labor. Ultra cheap labor. Okay, so old imperialism views of the natives. What kind of views of the natives do they have during the old imperialist days? They're savages. They're heathens in need of our salvation. And again, they hand Christ the sword, and Christ goes around, butchering people, doesn't he? Oh, gosh, that's sad to even think about, but that's what they believe. Hey, if they don't want to accept Christ, then we're going to kill them because that's totally what he's into. Oh, that was not quite there. All right, it was close. It was a slight overshot. It was a Shaq free throw right there. So sometimes it's cooperative. Sometimes it's cooperative. Who's got an example from American history of a cooperative relationship between the newly and the grown? Squanto, yeah. All right, so Squanto at Massachusetts, where he taught them how to grow corn. And they were like, wow, this is amazing.
I'm always going to remember Squanto except for in the first grade play.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was my part. I had to show people how to grow corn.
There you go. Thank you for doing that, by the way. You saved America.
I know.
So, appreciate that. All right, so conversion by the sword. Yeah, we got that. All right, good. And then exclusion and exploitation. So, why would they not include natives in their society? Why would they not try to assimilate these people? What do you think?
Better.
Because feelings of betterness, okay, even after they convert, though, are natives typically incorporated into this colonial society? No. I mean, so even if they convert, no matter what they do, there's that barrier that's always maintained between the white Europeans and the natives. That is slightly going to start to change once we reach the Enlightenment, because they're going to start to come up with this idea of cultural relativism. It's very similar, I mean, if you want to make a comparison that you've heard of before, moral relativism, right? And so with moral relativism, what's that idea? That derived also from the Enlightenment?
But all morals are relative.
relative to the person and the situation. So what might cultural relativism mean according to those same Enlightenment thinkers? Same thing, right? So the culture is better depending on the time and the situation and the people. So are white Europeans necessarily the best and the brightest and the coolest, according to these Enlightened thinkers? No. In Europe at that time they might be considered better, but you go to other places of the globe, like El Dorado, which of course is a fictional place, but if you go to El Dorado, do they have things down way better than the Europeans do? Yeah, okay, so what book am I talking about? Candide. And which author am I talking about?
Voltaire.
Voltaire! Oh, yes, wonderful. All right, so they're going to start to recognize the values of other cultures and achievements, determining that, hey, there are other great people out there that have good ideas other than just Europeans, because maybe we're not so smart after all, as we're, killing each other like crazy back in Europe. All right, and then there's the human side of natives that's going to start to be emphasized at this time too, trying to say, you know what, they are people too, essentially, and so what's the new idea going to be? Rather than exclusion and exploitation, by the time we get into the 18th and 19th, late 18th and early 19th century, what's the new idea going to be? Any ideas? Okay, so good example here would be the very enlightened thinker of Thomas Jefferson. So TJ, remember, he did not want to go out there like Andrew Jackson and remove and destroy Indian culture if necessary. Instead, what did TJ want? Why do you want the Louisiana Purchase? Okay, to establish trade relations and good relations with whom? The Indians. So he said, hey, well, we want this for America to expand, but we also want it as a method of, establishing better relations with the natives. Hopefully they'll join us in this idea. If they don't, we'll have plenty of room for them to, scoot over to a different part of the land where they can be happy and we won't get in each other's way. So assimilation is going to be the new goal of enlightened thinkers by the 19th century, where, by the way, what is this assimilation?
Two cultures.
Yeah, so one culture typically doesn't...
From making babies with the other.
Yes, apart from miscegenation, they are going to join cultures, right? So they're going to start to join cultures, especially if one side has to give up their stuff, like their language and their religion. It's kind of the sad thing. But that's progress, at least. It's better than slavery and exploitation. All right, and so the perpetrators of old imperialism. We've got Great Britain, we've got France, we've got the Netherlands, we've got Portugal, and we've got Spain. So these are the big countries, and the participants. Who are the people that are going out for these countries to do this stuff? Explorers, all right, entrepreneurs, intrepid conquistadors. So corporations are a big one too, because they've got what in order to make this stuff happen? What do they have? They've got money. And is it just because one dude has all the money typically? Because what do they use? They have what? So stockholders, right? So they have stockholders in the company that help them do that. Then we've got adventurous individuals. Give me examples. Chris Columbus. Who else? Magellan. And Marco Polo before, but yes, Marco Polo. Who else? Amerigo Vespucci? Yeah, Amerigo Vespucci. Okay, very good. And then Hernando Cortez is another big one too. The conquistadors. And then religious exiles. So, the Puritans, they have their own little great migration, don't they? Why? Why did the Puritans take off during the rule of Charles I? Religious freedom, because is Charles I that good of a guy in any realm? No, he's really not. So they were ready to leave, certainly. They went to the Netherlands, but that was just too congested. And they thought, well, hey, maybe we could go to America. We got all that? That's a lot of stuff, but I mean, if you had to summarize in one paragraph or two paragraphs the issues of old imperialism under the mercantilist system in the 15th to 17th centuries, could you do it now? Yes, and then if you had to compare it to the new stuff, well, here you go. All right, so now we're going to see an expanding world market that's going to dramatically change the world. And so we're going to start to see the development of a lopsided world. What does that mean? By the late 18th century and early 19th century especially, how do we see a lopsided world developing?
Well, you got the Europeans, and they're all industrialized.
Yep. So they're more industrialized than the rest of the world.
They got a bunch of cool technology, and then you got Africa and stuff, and they're just kind of living in huts.
All right, there you go. So not as industrialized, exactly. All right, so 1750 there's not that big of a difference, honestly, between the old world, the rest of the world, versus Europe. There's not that big of a difference by 1750, because really the only country that had fantastic agriculture and scientific processes to do this were the Brits and the Dutch as well. And then the only country to really start industrializing at this point, starting to get involved in things like cloth manufacturing on a wider scale, was Britain again. But for the most part, nobody really had that different of a standard of living than the rest of the world. How's that going to change after 1750? Everybody in Europe is going to be starting to change that, because now they're going to have industrialization, which will widen gaps between what they had going on in, say, India or China, where they had some industry, but not nearly enough to keep up with what Europe was doing. And then income is going to stagnate in the third world as well, before 1913. So what does that mean? If income stagnates, whereas British income is skyrocketing. They were the best paid workers in the world in the 19th century. What do you think? If you have a much higher income in Great Britain, say 5 or 6 or 10 times the amount of wealth going to each individual's pocket than it would in, say, China, what's going to happen? Okay, so other guys' economies are going to fail because they don't have enough to invest and or to buy, whereas the British do, and so they're going to start to do that like crazy. So some industrial gains at this time. What are some innovations that are going to make imperialism possible? What do you think? Innovations that will make imperialism
Steam power.
Steam power, indeed. So steam transportation. How's this a huge advancement from what we had before? Yeah, you go way faster. All right. So we don't have to depend upon the wind either, which can be, a little bit perfidious from occasion, or when we're on the high seas, and then we don't always have what we need or direct it in the direction that we need it to go. Another thing is that now we have refrigerated ships and railway cars, and so now what are we more able to do? Have better quality food while we're floating. So are as many people dying on the ships across the big seas? No. Does it take a 3-month journey to get across the Pacific anymore? No. And if you don't have fresh water, well, now you can, because you've got a refrigerated ship that can freeze stuff and then melt it if necessary. All right? And then intercontinental trade routes as well are going to be developed at this time. So right at the turn of the 20th century, we're going to see things like the Suez and Panama canals being dug. So why will these help facilitate greater industrial gains as well? All the way around now. Now you just cut through the middle, and it's nice and quick. And finally, massive foreign investment. All right, so with this massive foreign investment, we're going to see a lot more people starting to invest in wanting things like greater colonies. And with those colonies that they're developing, they're no longer wanting to just go there and kind of set up trade, because that doesn't get them enough profit. So the bourgeois fat cats, what are they going to want to do? Instead of just going to a new country and saying, hey, we're going to park on the harbor and create a little trading center, what do they want to do instead? To better manipulate that market. Take over the country, set up shop with either a guy like Cecil Rhodes, who's a capitalist, and then run the country's economy that way, or bring in the British government or other governments and have them do it for them, right? And so that's going to be a big thing that'll change too. And then finally, population trends. We have a lot more people in Europe at this time, and so therefore, what are they able to do? Expand, populate, spread around the globe.